when I prune, when I do this and I check my own reflection, this is me being self-conscious, right? I think we can all agree that we do this kind of thing a lot of the time. And yeah, that's being self-conscious. And that's a common understanding, right? But then when I mention about being more conscious of yourself, and I break what self means in terms for the way I see it, and this is my explanation of the way I see it, is that myself is comprised of many different aspects. And I've named them such as ego, to say it's the aspect of the identity, the whole subject and philosophy and concept behind the form of self, right? And I've named that as ego. And I go on to name the body as another aspect and the mind as another aspect, and so on and so forth. And so then I move on with that terminology and I keep referring to the ego and self and using this kind of language. And so when I say myself or myselves, I think hopefully down the line, hopefully you can maybe see the difference of what I mean by word association. It's partly why it makes it so difficult when I'm trying to convey concepts and the language I'm using is being confused with pre-existing and common base understanding. I can't really get past that accurately all the time, but this is more close to a stream of consciousness, and it's the way I see things. So you have to try and take it as I see it, not the way you see it. So being conscious of self also includes being conscious of all of you, the uncomfortable truths as well as the comfortable truths. And the process of being more conscious of self, so self-conscious, that requires understanding of these concepts, of these aspects, and looking at them and observing them come to life, come to play in any given moment. And when your mind remembers the concepts and your awareness, you're like formless, nameless soul, like the real you behind all of this stuff that we layer on top without all of these abstractions and boundaries. Whatever we call ourselves and name ourselves and see ourselves as, be part of a group and associate and represent, and all of that is the enthrallment of the ego, and that's what comprises of all of your ego, all of yourself. That's just part of ego and not body, not mind, not other parts of yourself, but it's the ego part of yourself. And I can only just kind of keep using these words in a consistent manner when I'm referring to different perceptions, different levels of perception. And I'm referring to a higher level of perception where I'm identifying myself as being comprised of lots of different parts, giving them appropriate names and terminologies. And I am at the same time aware that sometimes I get frustrated and I get a bit like too blunt and I communicate in a harsh way. And it's very easy to trigger someone else's defense mechanisms and judgmental responses. And it shuts them down to a effective communication. So when I am more conscious of parts of me that I find uncomfortable, as in like, I don't like the way I said that just now, or I don't like the way I'm thinking right now, or I would rather have responded to that person in a different way. It's this kind of level of self-awareness that I would say is more in the realm of self-consciousness rather than self-conscious, like being self-conscious in the negative spectrum. Do you know what I mean? I would rather empower myself to stay more attuned to noticing every part of me in more of an objective fashion and be that form of awareness behind my, quote unquote, ego default state. I would rather not stay enthralled in that space. I would rather always have this level of awareness in the background, aware of me, self-aware, self-conscious, but not self-conscious enough so that I can't move past my flaws. I can't move past my errors. And it completely takes over my body. And then you start to get nervous and anxious, and then you shut down and your brain stops working and you start sweating and you start having a nervous breakdown in like a million different tiny moments. And it's insane. It's nuts. And we know it is, but yet it's there. It's true. And it happens all the time. We don't talk about it because we find it very difficult to even understand its nature because we don't want it there. We don't want it there, so we just reject it straight away. We don't want to form a relationship with it. We go, oh, this is such a, pain in the ass process that's happening in my psyche and in my emotions, and it transforms like how I respond to people and how I react in situations and how I word things to try and convey what I want to get across, what I find is important. And then it goes on to the language that we use and the communication that we prefer rather than what automatically comes out. So then we try and, make more time to compose ourselves. If we feel like we're energetically charged or we're triggered or whatever, we feel like we're responding to something in any given moment. If it's taking us over in the flavor of being self-conscious, if you catch your reflection in the mirror and your hair's a mess, or your makeup's not done right, or you have a spot, or any number of things that makes you self-conscious, your fashion isn't quite up to scratch, and whatever it is, and as soon as you feel like you're being self-conscious, just put a pin in every step of new awareness within yourself. And you might say, I've been aware of that all the time. I try and shut it up. I try and just move on and get on with it. Well, I'm advocating the process of, I'm not asking you to do anything with it right now. Just observe it as truth and let it be, rather than immediately trying to reject it because you don't like it. And I think that's something that we do like all the time. It's just like an unspoken thing that we do. And it's toxic. It's toxic on multiple levels, but from my standpoint, truth of just observing what is, so awareness of yourself to a degree that you're able to observe manners of yourself that you haven't had, you haven't managed to really understand it because you haven't given it time, and then the penny drops and you go, oh, that's the thing that he's talking about. That's the thing that I'm to look out for. That mechanism inside me, inside my psyche, inside my emotions. That thing where you can just simply say, oh, it's a trigger. It's caused some kind of effect. It's stirred something within you. Well, what is that something, right? And if you look at it in terms of aspects of self, I would say a lot of it sits within defense mechanisms of the ego. That is to say, your identity of self. Form. You give yourself form. Not form as in physical form like your body, but so yes, there's a big difference, I think, between being self-conscious and being afraid and anxious and having that haunt you all the time, next to being self-conscious, where you are conscious of yourself. And that is to say, that's the first step. That's in alignment with just awareness. Let awareness sit there and be aware of yourself without judgment. And just accept that that is a mechanism that's going on within you all the time. And the more that you just observe it happening and you accept it as truth of just your experience, that is happening within you right now, or whenever, and just over and over, kind of like stand by and just watch that and stay with that and get to know it and just observe where it flares up within you. And then when you start to watch it, it becomes self-conscious of itself. Your self-consciousness becomes like self-conscious of itself, because I'm sorry you reacted that way. I'm sorry you felt like that. If someone else reacted like I just did, I would probably have enough self-awareness to go, oh, there must be something going on in their lives. Like they need some help, if they chose to react that way, if they had all the time to just like compose themselves, if they could choose to say things or think things or respond, would they do it in that way? Probably not. And that happens all the time. We can't always moderate ourselves. And yet we're expected to. We're expected to be this like perfect version of ourselves, flawless, hide our shames, hide our discomforts, hide everything that's like deemed as, oh, no, like you can't do that, you can't say that, you can't, all of these imposed restrictions within society, which is built up on ego in the term of what everyone thinks it is. Like it's an inflated sense of self. It's inflated pride. In large egos, people refer to that as being like really arrogant or very prideful in a good way. But I mean, when I keep saying ego, I mean the whole identity of self. So that's why when I break self down into more constituents and I get to know them and form a relationship with that concept, witness it within myself, witness it within society, and I go, okay, I've got like lots of points of reference. I've observed it in such a way, and I keep understanding more the way I'm doing this process of just accepting whatever is true and happening in any given moment. And if it's within you, then just stay there and understand it. And after a while, you have to accept what is, because it's insanity not to. And that's where I realized that that's one of the reasons why society is insane. It's because we're insane. We're so hypocritical, and we're so contradictory, and we're so this, that, and the other. And we don't need to be like that all the time. if we as individuals made a concerted amount of effort into better understanding ourselves, and then, it'll go from there. And it's very difficult to try and communicate these quite abstract notions without triggering other people's defenses and judgmental assumptions based on misunderstandings of language, of words, associations. And it's a very difficult process to have to constantly keep thinking about the way other people perceive things and perceive you, and having to moderate your language, your tonality, your approach, saying it this way, saying it that way, remembering where they are in their levels of awareness and levels of consciousness. What terminologies do you think they're familiar with? What's the entry point that I can start talking to them on a like-minded level, where I'm kind of having to go back and think about early experiences that I had so that I can relate to them better, and then use words that they've heard of before and is in common understanding, rather than the associative, more broad and fundamental labels that I've attached meaning to, because language is so limited. And I'm on the dictionary every day, just looking at words that come to my mind. I go, oh, could I use that word? And then look it up. What does that really mean? What does it specifically mean? And then go into the thesaurus and then look at the thesaurus and look at different other words that I could use in its place that is more accurate. And I just do that as a matter of practice because I want to get my words right. So I'm sorry if I ever come across in ways A, B, C in your perception, in your level of awareness. I'm trying. I'm always trying. Sometimes I'm triggered, and sometimes I notice a discomfort within me that changes my physiology, that changes my mind, that changes my emotions, and it changes my words. It changes the way I communicate. It changes my energy. And then that might be received by other people as aggressive, or as too passionate or crazy, or but all of these higher energetic frequencies are different forms of high. They're all higher vibrational energies. And I guess that's why a lot of people who are prone to being overtaken and become enthralled with being in higher energy states all the time. If the majority of the time you're just always like that, and you've always been like that since a young age, or maybe since a particular event, then that's a clear signal to me that it's on this side of the spectrum rather than this side of the spectrum. Because you can also be triggered into very low energy states, very low, and you could say, one's negative and one's positive, but again, we put that association onto it as well. I try and just observe notions and concepts as I observe them within myself and within the world and within other people. And it goes round and round. That's my process. All that matters is the intent. The intent from me is pretty much always positive and encouraging and just for betterment. I'm curious, and I'm just trying to work things out, and I'm trying to find best ways to go about doing everything all at once, because there's so much ground to cover. There's so much to be discovered and to tell and to implement within reality to make everything better. So yeah, I get carried away and, you know, and all through it, I'm being more self-aware. And all of my experiences, I'm happy to document them so I can see them and I can watch them back. And it helps me become literally more self-conscious. And so through these studies, through this like journalistic approach, just for myself really, I am becoming more aware of uncomfortable realizations, you know, levels of being self-aware, where I go, oh yeah, I could have said that better, or why am I feeling like this? What triggered me to feel like this? This is not in my preference to feel like this. And so then you have choice, because when you are in that stage where you're aware enough of yourself and you see, oh, when Mark feels like this, you know, he's in this state, and then he becomes aware, oh, I'm in this state. Do I choose to remain in this state? Well, you know, it feels cathartic to like have a moan and have a gripe and like have a cry and have an outburst and punch something, you know, what dance, drink, like whatever impulse it is, it feels like you want to just, you know, express something that you've been going through. And if you are aware throughout the process, that is all just an admission that that is within you. And you should just accept that and try not to fight it. Form a relationship with it. Imagine if all of those characteristics that you see in yourself, the ugly sides, the sides that you want to hide away from society, you don't want to ever let light shine on them, right? All of those icks, all of those shameful little behaviors, acts, thoughts, whatever. All of those, I'm advocating one by one. Just imagine as if that is a person in front of you. That's someone you know. Maybe they're a close friend, maybe they're an acquaintance, maybe they're a family member, and you just have to form a better relationship with them. Without judgment, just try and observe what they're like at that moment and not assume that they're like that all the time. In fact, you probably know they're not like that all the time. So then, with enough control and enough like pure intent, you just observe them and you give them the benefit of the doubt and you just try and listen to understand what is going on right now. And they'll be probably enraptured in I don't know if enraptured is the right word, but they'll be enthralled in whatever experience, whatever state that they're in right now. Any form of triggered state, whether it's in the state of the mind or whether it's in the state of the ego, or in the in a state of high, or in a state of whatever. You know that they're just in a state. And that's a part of them that you've seen before. You've seen countless times before. And it's not convenient, it's not easy to broach the topic, to talk about it, because you don't want to trigger them into more levels of unconsciousness, more episodes. Because you know that person might be very easily triggered around this topic and around that topic and around that topic too. And basically you can't talk about anything in that area with them because you know that they'll just get triggered and they'll get in this state. And all of this is just, all of this is my mind, just like your mind, goes through all of these imaginations based on observations in our day-to-day lives. I advocate that those observations, put them more in yourself and love every part of yourself as if they are a person in front of you who's close to you, who you've observed, who you've formed a relationship with, but yet you've neglected. Don't neglect yourself. I know it's it feels impossibly difficult to broach subjects around like the qualities of an individual, because we're so enthralled in our sense of self, our pride, whatever it is, our ego, right? It's incredibly difficult to know how to word yourself, how to start the conversation. What question do you ask? How do you ask it? What are the words that you're using? It's incredibly intensive to try, as a therapist might try and do, to ask questions that are not specific and not vague enough. You know, it needs to be just right. And that is masterful. That kind of experience is invaluable. And I'm trying, just like everything else, to try and develop that too. And I haven't given that a name because it took me bloody 20 odd minutes to try and explain and get to this, because you've got to build stepping stones up to, you know, catching up to your level of awareness when it comes to this. And whatever. It is a masterful art form when you come across individuals who have worked on themselves and have worked on their composure and have worked on their level of self-awareness and self-control, self-discipline, you know, self-consciousness, enough so that they've made how they present themselves very effective, and they seem to know what to say, how to say it, and hopefully with their bodies as well, how to physically communicate, how they impress upon someone else their intention, that it's good, and that they have great ways to put things. You know, I imagine a scenario where, you know, someone has been trying to tell someone close to them, like say a girlfriend has been trying to say something to the boyfriend for a long time, and it's kind of around the topic of how the boyfriend is sometimes, and you know, it never goes well. And it never goes well the other way around either, or any other combination. It doesn't matter what gender you are. We all have egos, and it's all very difficult to even talk about parts of our ego because, you know, it's so difficult. We're not therapists, you know, we're not psychologists, we're not professionals in this field where we know how to accurately and like effectively communicate with each other, because we see truths. It's so blatantly obvious for an external observer. We see people around us all the time. We see it. We just don't know how to talk to them about it. Well, this kind of external experience, that's also the internal experience, because you're neglecting parts of yourself. So, full circle, just be more self-aware and self-conscious, as opposed to being unconscious, which is to say that you are enthralled in the aspect of your ego and you don't even know about it. And maybe only now, after half an hour, you've realized what the words that I'm saying mean, and it's more of a fundamental concept. And I hope this wasn't too much of a frying effect on your brain. And I also realize that I'm sounding arrogant as fuck, and sometimes I am. I'm trying.